Welcome everyone. Here we are. Welcome everyone to Design Miami Basel's Table Talks, hosted by me, Matylda Krzykowski, together with
me, Vera Sacchetti. We are Foreign Legion, and we are delighted to have our first table talk of the day with these esteemed guests. Would you care to introduce them, Matylda?
Of course. On my right side, we have Floor van Gaalen. She's head of program at the Nieuwe Instituut in Rotterdam. Next to her sits Marjan van Aubel. She's a solar designer, probably the most known solar designer in the world. And next to that is Pauline van Dongen. She's a designer who also works with solar energy and technology and other powers. And next to that is Felix Hallwachs, who is the manager of Little Sun.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good.
And we are gathered here today to talk about solar design, and the solar biennial, which is coming up very soon.
And the solar movement and the question what it means to design with and under the sun. So the first question that we're asking ourselves doing this with you and preparing it is, what is the solar movement and how did it start? And that's where we have to start with you both, because you're the ones who basically are heading this solar movement.
Yeah, nice question. I'm a solar designer, and I knew Pauline's work that she also integrates solar into fashion, and we only met each other 2 years ago in St. Petersburg at a conference about the sun. And we were in the bar, in the hotel bar, drinking White Russians, and said, like, that's crazy that we didn't know of each other, and we have the same mission, same vision, what we want to do with our work. That's like not seeing it as a technology, but really thinking how can design contribute towards this idea of like, what if everything is solar powered? What if everything is like powered by the sun, and that we see things, something is broken if it doesn't generate this energy, to really think 10 steps away from the technology. Mm-hmm. And then we said, like, okay, we as designers can do this, but then if we want to change this perspective on solar energy, a lot of people need to join, and we don't talk to each other. So we need to bring everyone together that is in this solar industry, but also academics, everyone, and together we can make this change. So that's how we started, and basically on the way back we already brought all our contacts together and organized our first dinner, and said, like,
basically.
And then we started a conversation.
Yeah. So that was 2 years ago, and from that conversation, basically, we all agreed that this existing narrative, this existing perspective on solar energy, is very much determined by a technological angle and an economic angle as well. And well, that was part of our frustration, because we feel that to really create change and to really embrace this new sustainable future that is powered by the sun, we really need to bring in more of a cultural perspective and bring in more human and ecological values that are nowadays still left out, we think. And luckily a lot of people agreed with us, and they also felt this urgency, and that's how it led us to come up with this idea of creating a solar biennial, our first large event to bring this new perspective into the world.
Yeah, not only like talking about it, like we had some session, like how can we bring this to like a bigger audience, and not only talking about it but really showing it, and how can we do that. And that's also why it's a biennial. It's every 2 years, and the sun moves different around the world. So in the northern hemisphere, for example in winter, the sun is very low, so you can have solar on buildings, but in, for example, Africa, it's a lot about being off grid and how can we share this. So that's why it's interesting that it's a biennial, to really make it a global thing as well. So yeah, the first biennial will be in Rotterdam in a year at the Nieuwe Instituut. And
then it will travel.
Yeah,
we will bring it to a next country or a next continent, and create like a plurality of perspectives on the sun, on our relationship with the sun, on our relationship with solar energy.
I think that's a fantastic starting point, but I do think we have to have a little bit of a step back here, because not everybody in our audience maybe knows what does it mean to design with the sun, and where can an interest in working with the sun arise from? So maybe just to take a little step back and go back, and if Marjan, you could explain, and Pauline also, what was it that got you into
The sun.
the sun, in
And
fact?
solar energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like, I think that like, just looking at the sun itself is a fascinating big thing we all know so well. And the idea that every hour, this fact is amazing, that every hour receive so much energy of it that it could power the whole world for an entire year. And then you look around and you see these blue panels on roofs and like these big solar parks. And that basically, that's it. That's like the relationship we have with solar energy. And as I've been like working with it for quite a while now, to really see it as a designer, see it as a different perspective. Especially in Switzerland, actually, a lot of different technologies that you can have transparent, see-through, you can have it in your clothing, you can be so much integrated. So I really saw sort of my role as a designer to, okay, I want to focus on only doing this. Like how can we create, transform every surface into sort of a activating surface that it's power itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was for me like a drive just by looking around and feeling, okay, there's a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can give us an example verbally. How does this work manifest itself with solar energy in your personal work?
Yeah. For example, next week there's the World Expo in Dubai will open. And then the Dutch pavilion, for that we made the whole roof with transparent colored solar panels. So when you're inside, you really feel you're like under a big church. So the colors and stuff, they already tell a story. But the idea that they also like not only grab the light, but also they power the pavilion.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's like really thinking a couple of steps further, like how can you make solar panels, for example, circular, and it's like sort of thinking beyond what is available now. So that's like an example, but another example is a light we made. You can hang in front of the window. One part is solar, one part is a sort of, when the sun goes down, the light in your house goes on. So it's really thinking, what is a building, where is the surface where it can generate its thing, and an object should be self-powered.
But it's a company that you found. What is the name of the company?
The
company's name?
The light called Sunne, yeah.
Yeah.
And we just did a Kickstarter, yeah.
Good, drop it there.
Yeah.
Just did a Kickstarter.
Very successfully also.
SUNNE.
That's right. Old English for sun.
Yeah, very good.
And Pauline, what about you? How did you start working with the sun?
Well, I have also always been combining textiles and technology in my practice since 2010. And I was first introduced, at least within my practice, to solar cells, solar panels in 2013. And I was immediately quite struck on this kind of relationship between the energy of the body and the energy of the sun. With the fact that we all need the sun, but we also have a way of energizing our body through sunlight. And this idea that you could actually be, to some extent, self-sustainable by wearing solar cells on your close to your body through clothing, through textiles. I thought that was already a really interesting concept. And also from a material point of view, my way of approaching technology is really through seeing it as a material.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of only looking at the functionality of it, I really start with exploring it from its material qualities, and then looking at what kind of new experiences, what kind of new practices, behavior it can let emerge from there. And that was also interesting for me, looking at these solar cells, because instead of them being quite rigid and uniform, I immediately started trying to bring more softness, more drape, more color and texture into those materials, and to see where else can you integrate this in daily life, and how can you invite people to have a different relationship with the sun, with the outdoor environment. So for example, I designed back in 2014 a solar t-shirt together with Hall Center, who developed the printed electronics that were part of it. And when you wear this t-shirt, you can generate your own energy. You can charge a phone, for example. So that is one part of what the shirt really does. But at the same time, while you wear it, you also become more aware of the weather conditions. The shirt really invites you to go outside more often, because it needs the sun. It wants sunshine. also you become more aware of how long you actually need to be outside to really charge a phone. So you really have a different way of looking at energy and of this energy relationship. And that's what really fascinates me still.
I have to ask, because I'm very curious, do you think is it applicable in the sense that, is it possible, do you think there is a market where you can actually launch the t-shirt and at some point in the future we will wear the t-shirt?
Yeah, I've always thought we can. I mean, for my work is quite pragmatic in that sense. I like to kind of like paint a picture for the future, but I also want to bring it in the now. So I've been wearing the shirt myself a lot. I've had other people wear it as well. So it's not a kind of fiction in that sense. What is really limiting me still, and this is part of one of my fundamental frustrations with the fashion industry, of course, is the unsustainability of it, but also the fact that garments are produced for such a low price in such unethical conditions. So launching something like a solar shirt is quite difficult because the technology itself is relatively expensive, it's difficult to produce, but it also requires people to treat their clothing in a very different way. You have to be much more careful and care for the product as well. And I would only launch a product like that if it would be not sustainable because of the solar cells, but also durable in a sense that people would wear it for a long, long time. And I'm afraid that the fashion industry still needs to make that change in order to.
But that's kind of cool. That sort of with the technology that also will change our behavior. For example, like when the washing machine was invented, not that we like we stopped caring about our clothes, and it's like we started buying more and more clothes because it was easy. So it's like sort of a thing that happened. Not why you think it was. If you think about the sort of your clothing as something that energizes you, you behave differently with it.
And maybe you won't wash it in the way that we do nowadays. That's true. Yeah. I'm also now looking more at like architecture, for example, to create like textile architecture. I think the scale of the body is relatively limited, of course. So if it's for self-sustainable purposes, it's fitting. But I think also, like Marjan is saying, there's so many different surfaces that are unused right now, and textiles make up a really big part of our environment. They also are really powerful in creating a certain atmosphere, a certain comfort. They invite being touched, which is something a normal solar panel maybe is not doing a lot.
Doesn't allow it.
That's a challenge.
Cuddling.
Hugging a solar panel.
Hugging a solar
But I mean, there is an object here at this table, which is in your neck.
We have to talk about it.
We have to talk about this. This you can hug in a way.
Yes, you can absolutely. Well, we started with Little Sun back in 2012, coming out of Olafur Eliasson's art studio, and part of this was based on the fact that we were looking at friends we had in Ethiopia at the time who were living actually beyond the energy grid. And then we realized, well, the price of solar panels, the power output of LEDs, everything had come to a point where it was actually technically feasible to produce a small solar-powered lamp. So you have this thing, you can put the big sun in the back, and then you have light for a night. It's like, would you turn on, please? now it's scared of the audience. So it's alive, now it's on. And then you have a little bit of light, which we can't see here because we have these huge spotlights here, and we have so much power here. But if we would briefly, click off the switch for the grid connectivity here, we would actually be sitting in darkness. And this allows you to kind of pull the sun down from the sky, hold it with you, and feel that you're a power station. I think that's very much in line with this idea. So it's really about creating a symbol. As you can see, this is designed to also look like a sunflower, slightly like a turbine. It also looks very close to the Ethiopian national flower. The mescal flower. And so when Olafur made the design for this, it was not about creating the simplest box for a solar unit, but it was about evoking emotions.
For creating meaning, maybe.
Creating meaning, yes, and emotion is important because, when we talk about energy, largely, energy feels impalpable to people. No one has a relationship to the wall socket where you plug in your devices. It's very detached and removed from us. So when I saw your table project, for example, that was, I don't know exactly how many years ago, but that struck me because you were literally the only one making an actual design project with solar, and we were just doing this. I thought, we have to meet at some point. So I'm super happy, by the way, that we connected around this biennial thought. But the simple fact that the design world, the art and culture world, everyone who is working in really creating a new vision of our surroundings has the ability and needs to use the ability to advocate renewable energy and to make it be something that we feel connected to as humans. So it is about emotionalizing energy. It is about making it something you feel has some sort of a direct relationship to you. Because of course we can all make the choice to switch our energy provider to green energy, to wind, solar, anything. And we could have all done that many years ago, but we evidently need more support to actually enable us all collectively as humans to act. And so I think these things, while they are to a certain extent symbolic, as you say, you cannot make the shirt as a mass production item yet, but the symbols are hugely and vastly important, and that's what we see. And we distribute these in sub-Saharan Africa, and you can actually buy them over at the museum here as well, and we have a small presence even at the art fair. We're literally the only ones at the art fair talking about sustainability. This group here talking about renewable energy, and the world needs that. So again, I think we are doing quite good in throwing all of these together and then saying we should invite more participants of the cultural world to use solar, to play with solar, to design with solar. Because of course, a table, a little lamp like this, that does not enable the entire transition to net zero. But the symbols are so important because then we all make the right choices moving ahead.
Yeah, Felix, was this little sun, was it the first time you worked with solar energy?
One of so Olafur began this idea together with a friend of his, Frederick, and his friend Frederick had been working on a solar-powered airplane project, not the big Picard project, but a smaller the first passenger-carrying solar-powered airplane to ever fly across the United States. Which is fantastic. And so Olafur and he were sitting and thinking, well, the solar-powered plane, it is complicated, it's expensive, it is still quite far from being a mass production item also. But the technology has evolved. We could actually make a little lamp, and that could be a mass-producible item. That could be something that could actually change the world from the first step of energy. The smallest possible kind of quota of energy. This is not even big enough to charge your phone with. It is literally the first kind of usable energy of the sun. It's a 0.5 watt solar panel, it's a 0.5 watt LED. There's a small battery inside. Anything below that is not usable, and from there on, though, the possibilities are limitless, basically, when you move up that energy ladder.
And that's also nice with solar. It doesn't matter what scale it is. You can have it quite small, but you can have it big. It doesn't matter because
and you can really have people engage with it, because normally all the fossil fuel based industries and networks have always been like tucked away, like out of sight. Like you don't want to engage with it, right? And I think with solar design, you can actually bring it closer to people. Like you said, we can really have a relationship with it.
Yes, and you have this. So this feels a little bit like a pet. So kids like this because they treat it. They put it outside during the daytime, then they've harvested the sun and it shines at night. So it's a very direct experience, and I think that this.
What it strikes, what the thought that I have looking at it, it's because you're talking about creating images, or pictures. It's a toy also, So it's in a way, So it's something playful, and I always think that the element of play always is really important, because that's with because you're limiting the boundaries, when it's something is playful to people to attract people's interest, because I think play is always something very engaging. And that's what I thought about when you mentioned it.
It's very much about that. It's like the positive. It's aspirational, but it's also positive and highly accessible.
Yeah.
And it's easy to join, yes.
I'm curious, because you're talking about access. What's the price point of Little Sun?
We sell them, it depends a little bit on the country that you're in. It actually depends heavily on that. So we have a price which is a largely European and North American price, which would range, depending on the country, probably between 25 euros and $35, depending. And in sub-Saharan Africa, the price point is quite different. It would be probably around $12 US, depending on the country, the import duties, and the geography. And what we do is we're a hybrid between a non-profit organization and a social business, which essentially means we use grant funding to cover all overhead expenses. We use grant funding for a lot of projects. But we also work with micro-entrepreneurs who would distribute these lamps in small-scale rural micro-distribution. And the target is to make them as affordable as possible, but still to enable structures that are generating local turnover and ideally generating an opportunity for scaling of the deliveries. And there are successes and failures in in both of the systems, but it's been highly interesting throughout the years because we began not knowing so much about, I have to also add that this is a consumer electronics product. I had to learn because the solar panel and the battery and the LED are controlled by an electronic chip. So if you want to manufacture this, you have to understand how, in the world of today, consumer electronics are actually produced. So that was an incredible learning curve. We came from art and architecture, so we came from making unique things and had to learn, and this is not news to you, but to me it was completely unexperienced to date. So it's been a great learning curve to understand also about the global flow of goods and how you can try to, you try to aim for circularity. You have a lot of ambitions, and then you have to deal with the reality of where you are in the current time and how you could potentially transform that. And
can I ask you, just curious how you said you had to learn how to design them so it can be manufactured for consumers. Did you experience that as, okay, this is what it should look like, otherwise we cannot make it? Or did you feel space to actually change something there? Or
I think there was a lot of space, and we had really interesting experiences. So we met a fantastic woman very early on when we just had a few prototypes that we had handmade in Berlin. And she was friends with people who ran a tiny production company in China close to Shenzhen. And they started making the first units for us. And they were this little shop. Really great people, good team, and we loved working with them. And then it turned out, though, that they were not in a position to handle bigger certification needs, which we then learned we had, because you have to be conformed to all kinds of standards, which is very good. But if you go into it from making prototypes and unique pieces, you don't immediately think about it. So we
different
somehow
protocols.
different protocols. And so we learned about that, and then we changed our manufacturing partner twice. We spent a lot of time, or parts of the team spent a lot of time going to all the different suppliers, so actually talking to the people who, not necessarily the company making the solar cells, but those who make the solar panel, which then we learned is, of course, a different ball game. And we started trying to source solar panels and just found crappy things at the time. And then we took Frederick's knowledge from making that airplane, and then he took some of the materials. We went to a solar panel producer and somehow experimented together with them. So we found a lot of goodwill along the way, which was great. But we also realized we need a whole supply chain management system. We need quality control. And it's if you're a tiny entity, like we're 20 people across the globe, spread across 3 continents, it's almost impossible to actually handle efficiently. But it does somehow work. And then we can ship out a container and ship it towards Ethiopia or towards Hamburg and Berlin. And we've made, I think, 1.2 million of these products to date. And most of them still work. And so it's incredible. So the team is, and I didn't do this, the team did this. So big thanks to the Little Sun team.
But when did it start actually? So you can relate
we
to
are
the
going
number.
to, yes, it's been kind of slow. I wish I could say we started last year, but it's actually almost 10 years now.
But I mean, it's also a testament to some sort of like commitment that you keep on going, because especially if you come from a completely different field like the arts and you get yourself into this field, then there's also a lot of chances that you might give up at some point. And I wanted to talk about something that you mentioned, which is this idea of failure. I'm sure that you have to be very much open to this idea of failure when engaging with these technologies as well. I mean, it seems certainly that there's an incredible, immense potential across scales, as you were mentioning, Marjan. But I was wondering if the three of you could briefly reflect on this idea of failure, of learning from your failure, and how has that the capacity
informed
to
your practice also.
Well, a lot of my work, at least, it's been learning by doing, for sure. I mean, I'm not a solar energy or solar technology expert, so I always collaborate with a lot of people, which has been a really, really fun and meaningful experience. But yeah, I really go about it just taking the solar cells, putting them underneath the sewing machine, seeing if I could pierce them and if they would still function. And of course, in that process, a lot is failing, I can tell you that. Failing forward. But also I don't know if it's necessarily failing, but also the frustrations of, for example, coming up with a system, with a solution, like indeed this kind of consumer electronic perspective of wanting to create like a small electronic module with the solar dress or solar t-shirt, and then talking about the connectors that are necessary to charge a phone, and then a year later, like all the connectors are changing, and you're like, okay, so how is this now still relevant? Like, how can you anticipate these kind of things? And these are definitely really challenging aspects of the work.
I mean, I make mistakes all the time, but that's like a design process. I guess, I mean, like same. I went to art school, and also I start making a solar side table with having a solar battery and some solar panels, and then it was first a solar panel on legs, and then really made it step by step, and like, okay, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Like a big failure. I think that, like, for me, that's maybe the same as you, but it's so difficult to go from something that is like, haute couture or something that's very expensive, and to make the right decision of when are you going to like to a mass scale, and how to do that. I'm making mistakes there now, I guess, with a Kickstarter, like, you've been through this process of like, okay, you need certifications for that. And if I would have known all of this, of course, I Googled it and you read about it, but when you're actually talking to your insurance about like, okay, good that I didn't know, because now otherwise I'm not sure if I would have done this process. But
it's a lot of pioneering.
I'm happy I make a lot of mistakes, but and I'm very persistent, so I'll get there in the end. But and you learn from your mistakes, so it's great.
Absolutely, but I think in this idea of failures, that's a very relative term, of course. I mean, when we were just stuck in customs in a country with a container of lamps for 9 months, and that felt like a failure for those 9 months. And then now they're out, so that's great, So even that somehow resolves itself. If the container had been lost, that would have been that's a bigger problem. That's more a monetary problem, though, probably in the end, and we do have an insurance for transport. So I think it's really about how you see your targets and what you want to do, and the idea of persisting and going on and trying again and trying a different avenue. What we're looking at, and we began Little Sun with the idea of being an energy company, which sounds, this is what we do when we are being an energy
production.
But it is this idea, because if you look at where we largely focus our impact work in sub-Saharan Africa, it is about providing access to energy. Energy enables all kinds of things. It's one of the underlying necessities to reach all of the Sustainable Development Goals, almost. And you can transform opportunity by providing energy. A small lamp is the first huge step. It's better for the household economy. You can learn. You don't inhale smoke all the time from fuel-based light sources. But it's just the first step. Then you need clean cooking, you need refrigeration, you need business tools to do things. I mean, look, we have phones lying around, we have microphones, like we would definitely not be talking to the world without energy.
That's true.
And for the 7 billion of us, that is the key thing. Now, from the German perspective, we look at limiting emissions because that's what we need to do right now. That's our big climate problem. But from the perspective of people who have been beyond the energy grid, it's about having access. And now, luckily, and this goes back to what you said about the different scales. This is the great thing about renewable energy. You can do really small things, decentralized solution. It's a very democratic process. You do not need a government necessarily to come in and lay huge power lines and connect it to big power sources, be it coal or nuclear or anything from the traditional old side of things. But there is this window of opportunity now that you can do things differently. So we can transform. And in places where there is no access to energy, new methods, new technologies can be used. They are becoming affordable. And I think, so for us, the biggest failure in my mind right now is that we haven't, and this is not just Little Sun, but we as humanity haven't somehow found a method to fund enough renewable energy to actually power the world, not just Global North, but Africa, all places that do not have access to energy, because we could. And so collectively we are always on this brink of failure, but we always also luckily see some hope, and that's why we're here together, right? So the Solar Biennial is about addressing that, about making the proposition that we have an opportunity in the world. We can transform everything to a net zero economy, but we need everyone's mind on it. We need everyone open to fail and to try things and to move ahead. And the creative world, designers, the art world, that's where failure is okay. probably in well-run corporates, failure is also okay, right? So you need this tolerance for failure to have evolution.
But therein I talk a lot about failures because we think failure is also equally to successes, you know. And all the examples that the three of you named are interesting because it just shows that you're learning by doing, as much as I don't like that term really, but that's a reality, you know. I mean, there's a great idea and there's a great idea that you want to manifest, but between the actual speculation of a goal and the idea, there's so many steps to take, and you only learn through the process, you know. And the things that happened to you with, you know, that for 9 months one load of production was maybe time-wise it actually affected something else, you know, that was actually not a failure but then became also success. So these two terms kind of strongly are connected, go together. But I wonder if we're gonna hear a little bit about Flora and her role.
I think we should, but we also should have a glass of champagne right now.
That's a very good idea.
Just thinking.
I will do you guys the favor of serving the champagne.
Fantastico.
Very
And
good.
while Matylda is doing us the honor of, wow, we even have amazing glasses and everything. I'm excited. Maybe we could use. Thank you so much.
Should I
Wow,
do this?
I don't know. We have to place our glasses in a beautiful way.
Maybe
They're
I
so
place
nice.
them here next to.
They echo our flowers because we have
Yeah.
like a nice glass
Very
with
considerate.
a nice green flower. Wow, amazing. Thank you.
I also, while we're taking this quick in-between break, want to say thank you to Nela Weber, who is a Basel-based ceramist and scenographer, who actually came this lunchtime and did this table setting. All the ceramic works that you can see on the table are also produced, handmade in Basel by Nela Weber. Maybe we give Nela a quick little applause.
Very nice. Yeah.
Nela.
Thank you.
Okay, this is even cold, ladies and gentlemen. And I
Right,
hope
so to the solar movement.
we're celebrating the solar movement.
And hoping not to sort of pop any of these lights.
Our fake suns.
Control.
There we go. Oh.
Oh my God,
goodness.
that's exactly not what I planned.
Failure. This is design process here.
Yes.
We're learning
on failures and
we're-
successes.
We're learning
But
from our
champagne.
failures. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Matylda. Beautiful.
I have this theory that everyone in the world, once in their life, should work in service, because we have to learn to treat each other well. Should be even like in a curriculum in a school. How Vera, are you?
Okay, I'm the
How to
last
host,
one.
yeah.
Thank you
You're
so
the
much.
last.
For
You're the
being-
last and the first.
Thank you so much.
Here we go.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, before we raise our glasses to do a toast, I maybe want to say that when pivoting to this idea of a solar biennial and why a solar biennial, I think it's important
There you
to
Thank you.
kind of try to understand this role of a biennial as kind
You
of
forgot
a...
yourself.
Oh, you forgot yourself, Matylda. Okay. But Flora, maybe before we start thinking about why a solar biennial, I think that it's important also to reflect on this idea that a biennial as a format is something that has great potential, but it's also ripe for reinvention. I think we've seen in the past that this idea of every 2 years another exhibition that shows, let's say, the state of the world is maybe not the most interesting or sustainable format. So maybe, I don't know if you have some
That was
thoughts on that.
exactly the question we
That's
discussed.
great.
No, super, yeah. I work at Het Nieuwe Instituut in Rotterdam. It's a museum, an archive, all around architecture, design and digital culture. And we focus a lot on like an eco and social just future that really brings together, I think, the program for the coming years. So when Marjan and Pauline approached us, like, could we organize this biannual, and could you be the first sort of host to do that? That was exactly what we discussed. Like, hey, if this is really about moving forward, is then the Biennale the right format for that? Or what would we... Yeah, but indeed in these conversations, I think it quickly became clear that what's interesting of a Biennale format is, of course, that it's repetitive. So obviously this challenge won't be solved in one edition. So the repetition, the endurance in a way that would work well. And also the idea of a traveling biennale, to acknowledge that solar power is really a particular local affair also. And yet you can really share this international global knowledges. So making sure actually that it wouldn't be, let's say it would be a biennale having really a solar powered potential. So we're looking into Het Nieuwe Instituut's building together also with the municipality of Rotterdam. How can we actually use this momentum to make a solar powered institute, for instance? And then this is a moment to start with that. So in that sense, we're a bit using the Biennale format, I think.
To push ourselves.
To push ourselves and also make sure, to really ask these questions also in the programming, in the exhibition, like what materials do you use? So we're very aware of that.
That's great. So what was the sparking, the sort of the spark that got you guys together thinking about this?
Yeah. Well, I think we're, for me, like the New Institute is like the place where these questions about the future are being asked, and it's a place where we can ask this question. And like a solar movement is like creating a movement, and like that's like the sort of you start somewhere, and with the question you didn't think about yourself, you some things will happen, and that's why it's not because it's biennial. The questions now will not be answered in 2 years, but maybe they will come up in 4 years, for example. So I see this as a traveling. Maybe it should be a solar virus or something, but it's a bit negative. But it's like a movement that could spread.
I think we hope to see ourselves more and more as this testing ground for design, so that it's a place actually. I think even maybe success and failure are like, can we think of another word which is in between? It's really about reflecting research, but also indeed by just doing testing. And that was really a great match. And to also look for ways to have a sort of common ground where you can actually have these meetups between different types of designers. Because collaboration, that's I think what really the new generation also breathes. But how do you do it? How do you then again sort of grasp that moment? I think that's where we really felt connected. And also the question to think it through. So to acknowledge that energy in a way is not endless. So you were indeed saying, we could, of course, have endless energy in a way, or enough for the whole world. But what I also like about the solar thing is that the sun, like the earth is moving. Yeah. So there's also some time when it's dark, and maybe that's okay. And we just came from a period which was, of course, very challenging, but let's say it's really also about thinking with the sun, and not necessarily in that sort of more maybe Tesla story of we can solve it. It's fine if we have endless energy, because in a way maybe the holistic sort of worldview would say that's not the concept that we might want to work towards, but more be in tune, be more connected in that sense. So, and I think the New Institute did a lot of research also in for example lithium, which you need for the batteries to store the energy. So to, not stop at, it doesn't start and stop with solar cells, but there's a whole chain. And that I liked how you were also discussing already, doing the research to the cells, or how you can work, eventually making products. But sort of being aware of all these connections. That's
maybe it's also a way, if I may speculate on and expanding this topic also. I have never heard about a solar biennial, and there were in recent times a few exhibitions that talked about energy,
or scarcity, for example, so resource deployment and so on.
But I think the importance is, in order to address a big audience, you need formats that people relate to, and
True.
And it's a fact that even though maybe the sustainable footprint isn't there when you think about the Biennale that ships a lot of items and objects and things, and that's the hardest thing for me sometimes making an exhibition. Also, is the challenge that you want to exhibit all these ideas, but when you think about what it costs to bring these ideas into one place and to maintain it, or maintain also the energy of an exhibition and a biennial, you know. But still, you want to partner up, you know, like we sitting here together, building a relation to each other, becoming allies, you know, in a way, you know, through collaboration and through the possibility of finding even more partners, not only in Switzerland but in the world, that will kind of contribute to this biennial. Because it's a global conversation that we have. That is obviously in every country is very different. There's a distinction. But I think the format of choice is, and I mean, while you were talking, I was even thinking, that doesn't mean that every Biennale has to be the same. Maybe the second rotation will be only one pavilion.
Yeah,
you know?
of course.
But maybe let's go back to sort of the
Can we cheers for one?
cheers to the solar biennial, of course.
On the
Solar
kickoff.
Cheers to the solar biennial.
Cheers.
Everyone,
Cheers.
on the solar biennial kickoff.
Cheers, guys. Cheers. I want to go back to the nuts and bolts, though, which is, you know, a biennial usually is characterized by a variety of programming, by an exhibition. Usually the backbone of a biennial is an exhibition. How are you thinking about these formats? Is it going to be completely different? Are you going to show, let's say, the potential of solar technology and of solar design? Are you going to start conversations? You were mentioning now the city of Rotterdam. That sounds very interesting. So how are you thinking about this across scales?
Yeah, maybe you can start. Like, you are really the Solar Biennale. We're in charge of the exhibition, you could say, and together we...
Yeah, so I think the Solar Biennial has different components, different types of programming, of course. And I think the New Institute will be the main location. So that's where we have a large exhibition that features work of different designers and artists, work of scientists that really not only inspire people, but also can activate them somehow, or can at least make solar design more experiential. Because a lot of people have never really seen a lot of this work up close, or have never even, touched a solar fabric or sat at a solar table. So that is, I think, one aspect of it, that a large audience can really engage with these works and look at what is already out there and how that is different from the traditional panels that they can already find on a roof or in a field, but that they have no relationship with. But then besides the exhibition, we also have other programs like a seminar, for example, that are much more focused on professionals from the design field, from science and technology, from the solar industry, to really have these people meet each other, engage with each other, have some exchange, but also some sharing of knowledge and ideas. We have some solar labs in mind even, where people can work on a specific topic for a week long.
Like workshops, basically.
Yeah, like a kind of workshop indeed. And all of this program is basically structured around 4 different teams. So this idea of scale indeed, but also this the degrees of intimacy somehow. Like we created 4 themes. The first one is the personal. So really our personal relationship in the intimacy with solar energy, with solar objects and surfaces. Then we have the social. So how does solar energy create new social relationships, the sharing of energy, the rituals around solar energy and design, new rituals that we can create actually with the sun. Then we have the spatial. So how does solar integrate with our built environment? How does it change mobility? Think of solar cars and solar roads. And then the environmental. So that's again zooming out even further. Looking at the landscape, looking at ecology, looking at the resources, the circularity of solar panels. So that's how we divide our program.
Sounds ambitious. How long will we have for all of this?
It gets more ambitious by the day, basically.
As long as we need.
We will do this for a year and a half. No, that would be great, but I guess...
I think 6 weeks, right? Will be the intense period. The exhibition will last longer and it will pop up, I think, in multiple places, also in the Netherlands. So.
So now we are like having some fixed program. So exhibition. We have quite a lot of partners now, so it will be 6 weeks, and we will end at the Dutch Design Week, but it will travel through the Netherlands. So it's like you come to the Netherlands for the Solar Biennale, and there will be a lot of programs in the lecture series, but also maybe some pavilions that we built with architects. And so yeah, we're really thinking, how big can we go?
I'm basically laughing because Ariane van der Ween, who also works at the New Institute, she actually emailed me yesterday, and I'm allowed to publicly speak that I'm the curator of the exhibition.
Yeah.
And I was just saying to Flora that I'm laughing because we could have called it not table talks, but the meeting.
About
like a public meeting for everyone to watch.
Where, of course, I know some of the things that they mentioned, you know, but for me it's also interesting from a curatorial perspective to work with people who have generated that knowledge over the years, you know. I mean, you've done so in-house research with lithium, but also connected to solar, and you're interested by building own solar panels on your own house, you know, and it's a push for you to implement change in the institution. And you're talking about these examples and also with scientists, and that's the interesting thing also about curating, you know, also in the form of, you know, tackling themes like technology, is you delving from a different perspective into a theme, and you can see how you distributed knowledge, you know. And what very much is a big connector here in the conversations that you have is really about how do you make the topic so approachable for a bigger audience that this kind of, you know, there's this fear sometimes. I sometimes, when I talk about, since I know that we're going to work with each other, I mention solar design, and there's a lot of people who don't have the knowledge. That are afraid of, or don't understand the technology, the implementation, the accessibility.
But that's why I think it's also important to have a show a bit of like historical context. Like solar panels are super old, you know. It's like 1890 or something. They were invented, and they were first produced from the 1960s. Charles and A. Reams have been making amazing installation with solar panels, but and how they work, you said, there's not a solar cell, because solar cell needs to go into a panel to be laminated. All these like things that are, because we're in the field, are quite normal for us, but maybe it is actually not that difficult. It's like a sun comes up to a surface, it puts electrons into movement, and then you create power. You can explain it, you can go into detail, but it's not that difficult. So, and that's going to be your task, your role, how to make that
your responsibility,
how to make that fun, and like.
But the thing that I think is really, really interesting is that this is a topic that, you know, it affects us all, and it could potentially have an enormous amount of impact if, at this personal level, as you were mentioning, Pauline, you can really sort of make it understandable for people that this is in fact something that has a massive impact on their everyday existence, really, or could have. And therefore, this idea of sort of like getting people to feel that this is also their issue, and sort of making people understand that it's also about their agency and their interest, I think it's a crucial element. And I think, I mean, as you've explained, you will have different kinds of agents, not just people from, let's say, an artistic background or design architecture background, but also somebody from the scientific, more technical, technological
policymakers.
Policymakers, very important. That's fantastic. I mean, I think the only thing that's missing there is really just the general audience, and sort of like this outreach, which is perhaps maybe then more of a role of the New Institute as well.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing there. So what you say, agencies, is really crucial, right? The feeling that we all have that we are actually creating our surroundings, essentially, and that we have this agency, we can make decisions. And in a way, we realized with this little tool, you can give this feeling of solar agency to kids even. You know, we've done some educational work with Little Sun, going to schools, working with even kindergarten groups, and then older students. And you have the feeling if you seed the solar idea in the right place and in the right way, and make it palpable and make it emotionally, that you create exactly this feeling of agency with people. And so I think that's how our conversation started with this. Well, you know, Little Sun is the simplest possible symbol that you could have for solar energy and for holding hands with the sun. And then, because I always then tried to figure out how could I, you know, use whatever we do in Europe to support the work that we're trying to do in Africa, we were talking a little bit, and the thought crept up on me that we should make some fantastic pavilions for the biennial, because you said there are decentral locations, right? And we need symbols. We need positive symbols. We could work with a diverse group of designers, architects, artists from different places, maybe create sculptures that are essentially harvesting the sun, or citizens. And then once the biennial is over, after 6 weeks or longer, we take those and we convert them to small rural village electricity hubs. But that we don't actually call it, solar panels. We call it a sculpture, because again, we come from the arts and from the creative world. And it is this idea, and I think that can create a whole added level of accessibility and of allowing people to feel that agency. And this is where the cultural group again comes in, and where we can tie that in. So it's not about supplying a technical solution to a problem. It's about supplying something beautiful that connects you to the world and connects you to the power of the sun.
But what strikes me, what you say, is this idea of community building, from different expertise, the exchange, taking time, sharing the knowledge, mediating. But you were saying that this idea of bringing something into a city and taking it away. That's the problem I have with biennial. This, you bring a lot of people from outside to a city or a location. They produce, they bring energies, ideas, thoughts, and then you take it away again. And the question of a biennial should be always, how do you bring that energy? How does it stick? How does it stay? So a pavilion, if it's built, should stay. A playground that is built should also stay. An exhibition obviously is a temporary and is there for distributing knowledge in a different format. But I think it's really important when you've done that kind of work, and you've done it for a really long time, because I know that I will be the curator now, but the exhibition only opens in a year, and 12 months is quite a lot of time actually to tackle that topic and to address the topic and bring a lot of positions in. But then you really have to ask yourself, how can it resonate, and how can it be implemented?
And I think that the issue of staying is interesting, and also, and we look at this a lot. So when you look from Germany to sub-Saharan Africa, to most people in Germany, sub-Saharan Africa seems very far away. To most of the people I work with, I don't know, in Ethiopia and Zambia, Germany is rather close. So the feeling of distance is very, very different. And I think on this trajectory to a more just, more inclusive, and more equitable world, there are some steps we can take even in a biennial in the Netherlands. It could be something which really draws on global creativity and global knowledge, and then either there are things that stay, or maybe they have a planned afterlife, and some of them go to places, and you already know about that from the beginning on. So you already know you're part of something which is at once local, but also relates to other people. So I love this idea of something being inclusive. Essentially, the sun is shining, as you said earlier. It's everywhere in the world. At different times during the day, we all see the same sun. And I think so for a solar biennial, there's an interesting opportunity to be at once local and global. And so I don't have a real pitch for that yet, as you can tell. So this is kind of vague and out there. But this is a meeting, right? This is not a panel talk. This is a meeting. So here we go.
Yeah, but it's very interesting what you say. This resonance is also a very big issue in a cultural manifestation of this kind. And I feel like, on the one hand, it all comes down to the network. So it's very useful to have sort of like partners in every different kind of field, so you can actually create this resonance. But this issue that Matylda was alluding to, sort of the presence, I don't know if I agree that it needs to be a physical presence. Like if a pavilion is there, then it should stay. But rather, if you do a public program within the pavilion with a series of people, those people shouldn't just be dropped after the biennial is over. Say, thank you so much for enjoying the program, and see you never, see you never again. And it's just about this, I think what I'm trying to get at is this idea of long-term commitment also.
Yeah, I think there is also a really big role for the movement, because we've been talking about like solar movement, solar biennial, and I really see the solar biennial as an event and as a way to create this momentum and this resonance. And then when the Biennale travels to another location, all the energy that's gathered in that previous location should of course continue, or should be picked up and brought forward with the solar movement. I see a responsibility for the solar movement there to do that, and to make sure that people remain connected and remain in conversation, and then that the kind of projects that they envision during that, just like we come up with this pavilion, that they come up with something of their own, and that they continue it when the Biennale is finished, basically.
Because I think the companies you're already also working with, they are working on this continuously. So it's more this momentum saying, hey, we're in this together, let's show it together and exchange. But it's actually, I mean, you have the 6, the 9-year plans. I think every company in energy is working on it.
The energy companies are, and we you know, we touched the solar industry for one, and we just did a campaign this spring funded by IKEA Foundation, actually, which was called Reach for the Sun. And we asked an artist to contribute, and essentially it's a rather simple invitation to take a 10-step journey to become more solar. And we got so much highly positive feedback from the actual solar industry because it was something emotional and palpable that people could relate to. And so many people working on the real technology of solar come from a scientific, more technical background, and the art and culture world, I think, can do a lot to mediate that and to give it more of a positive presence and resonance. And again, the accessibility idea comes in. And so Little Sun, in a way, we're kind of between art and solar and development and collaboration. We're kind of a hybrid of many sorts. But in a way, the Solar Biennial can also be that form of hybrid, that form of uniting element that really puts together the scientists and mediates their voice through the creative class.
Yeah, and that's why it's a biennial more than a sort of a world expo where all countries come and show their latest innovations. Like that's not the whole point of the thing. It's like the underlying questions, and how can we collaborate? How can we do this together and then move? It's a global movement. So.
And also mobilize the design world, because I think, I mean, we've discussed this more often, but the fact that this idea of solar design is not embedded within any kind of design education, that's actually a big flaw of the system in a way. Like, why is it not? So maybe we can also mobilize something there. That's the methods or the kind of like design approaches that you can take, that these can be also embedded within design education.
Yeah. Is it a subtle open call to the audience and the possible partners that are out there that are possibly listening from Culture on Commerce? Can they? What is the process? You know, can they email you both? Is there a Solar Biennale website? Is there already right? What is a Solar Biennale? No, Solar Movement.
The solarbiennale.com.
Okay, so the solarbiennale.com, and we find there's a website, like there's an email, right?
Yeah.
So people could potentially email you and get in touch and propose or start a conversation.
I think the solar movement is, like you say, more important because it's like this wave, this movement that's been under construction still, because this is our first meeting here. Yeah. But it will happen, and it also happens in the biennials only in a year, so we have time. But this will be sort of the driving force throughout all the biennials.
And people can definitely email us already. We have hello at thesolarmovement.org. So if people have ideas or if they want to already discuss something with us, that's already possible.
It's a nice gesture to have that possibility, you know, because from all the exhibitions and the institutions I work with, and Vera also, we've also sometimes talked about that sometimes it doesn't take or need an engineer, you know, like or a designer or an artist, but there's so many people who have a certain knowledge that they acquired, you know, by themselves, and it's really nice also to think about it as a possibility where the citizens, the public, really contributes to this discussion, because they're the one that you want to change. You know? They're the one that you want to kind of give a certain knowledge and an agency in order to work with solar energy. But I have a provocative question to all of you, because we're talking about the solar movement, right? Is it possible to run the world only by solar power? I know you don't have an answer for it, but it's about having a discussion about it. We're in a meeting. But not just say yes or no. I want to hear, like, if this and this happens, this could, you know, like, let's create a picture. A scenario for people who listen to the solar movement. How could it look like? We could even small scale talk only about the city. and then the world.
I think it's possible. I mean, I think everything points to it being very possible.
Yeah.
Solar panels, materials, quality, price points. We've seen last year the affordability of a larger solar farm became something real. It became more efficient to build a solar power plant than a coal power plant in many regions of the world. And that's a simple economic reality. So we're moving into a phase where sometimes economy will actually simply solve the issue for us because it will just not be worthwhile to invest into other forms of energy because this is most efficient. On the other hand, it still requires a lot of people energy, I would say. So it requires a lot of willpower. It requires a lot of us pushing together. And so, well, you're kind of, in my mind at least, you're right. I don't think it's a technical question of will it be possible. It's a human question of will we make it happen? Will we make it possible? That's where we're sitting here.
Do
right?
we
So-
want it to happen
Yes.
then?
Yeah, and can we
Exactly.
change our own behavior, our own expectations also? I think what solar does and what solar design also does to designers, I think, is that it really humbles you. Because you have to work with this giant force of energy that's far, far beyond our reach. And you have to go with its flow in a way. Like you have to adapt your way of relating to energy to the sun, to its rhythms, to the season. You know, like there's so many aspects to it that within our existing energy systems, they're not taken into account. It's out of the question. And so that's an interesting, like you're talking about, like it's a kind of like energy of people that needs to change. Like it's behavioral change. It's also, maybe more important than the actual factual technical aspects of it.
There's an interesting thing there because some of it is leapfrogging. So we want to, we want to jump over a few steps and get further. And some of it is actually more backfrogging. So we have to hop back. And then, if you look at buildings, I'm an architect by training, so buildings are a big frame of reference for me. But building design has such an influence on the internal climate of a building, for example. And the biggest emissions, I think, in North America, for example, are cooling, building, cooling, and heating. So smart designs can solve a lot of those. So exactly, then it's not even a question of supplying the energy, it's a question of building differently, so you do not even need to consume that
shows
energy.
also the holistic and the integrated approach that you need to take.
Yes.
We cannot just stick solar panels everywhere and then we have it solved. Like it's, that's...
But that's why I'm asking, because one question is just to change someone's behavior and attitude towards it. But then also things that you, for example, the three of you do is also this aesthetic implication of how solar design looks like or could look like, I mean, I just spent a few weeks in the mountains and I mean, every house more or less was run by solar power, so it does prove that it's possible, and I mean, there was never a moment in the day for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, where we didn't have, where I couldn't switch on, the light or I couldn't charge my phone. And I was asking the owner of the house since when he has these panels, and that was for me an eye-opener because he said, oh yeah, since 50 years, and it's like, I mean, that solar panel is older than me. But he said that he has to replace it because the engineering and the production of it 50 years ago was very different to today. So the technology also has changed and improved in a way. Similar idea of like the light bulb that once was more damaging to our environment, and apparently, sometimes I also think it's a sales argument,
pitch.
Sales pitch. The light bulbs that are sold to us that don't last longer than the old ones, and that's what I'm a bit afraid of sometimes with technology. It's this kind of, it's interesting, but I'm doubtful.
Yeah.
But how can you convince me?
But can't
And
technology
how
make a
can,
mistake too?
Oh.
Technology needs to learn as well, right? It's all a process. And even that's why I like that you can also learn from the past, like how the Greek or the Chinese built their buildings, they're really looking at the sun. So that's how you position, always facing towards the south, because then you're cool and warm in winter, but cool in summer.
Oh.
It's like super simple things. Like we don't build houses like that anymore, but it's just a position, and the solar panel can move with the sun. It can track it. So your question about like how to do that. You have to look where is the sun at that time, and I don't think a solar will be the only answer, but it can power hydrogen, for example. So it will be a hybrid thing, and sometimes there's wind and no sun, but it can definitely be a main source of energy.
But I still want to hear a scenario.
A scenario. You want to see a picture?
Maybe indeed it will lead to a response or another way of thinking. The idea that everyone can have their own solar power on their house, which is already for 50 years maybe in some countries quite logical, that also could play in a bit in the more individualistic tendency of take care, like the tiny house movement, let's take care of yourself, we can solve it, but that's also a bit contrary maybe what's also the potential definitely also of the solar thing, that indeed there's only one sun and we all have to, like the one solution for one person is another one's problem. Yeah, we're in it together. Could you think of indeed scenarios where it's more in a more community way indeed?
Actually, we just talk about the bottle of water, and like, okay, you carry your bottle of water, but it's also changing your behavior. What if we just carry our bit of, you need water, you need energy, that's like kind of like food. You carry your energy, solar energy with you, and then you store it again. It's like,
But I look at this again from a perspective of a colleague of mine is in Zambia and working on supplying power in a village in Mumbwa. It's like 3 hours or 4 hours from Lusaka, from the capital. So the first step is really a small lamp. The next step is kind of a home solar system, battery, solar panel on the roof, a few lights, maybe some appliances. And now the small company we're working with who are supplying these solar home systems, they have added a function of creating a mesh. And that is interesting. So this is then the idea that in a small village, you could actually run cables between the houses, and different houses could, depending on their spending power, buy solar panels for the system or not. And the household can become an energy entrepreneur and sell to other households. And so even in the decentral systems, you have the opportunity of reconnecting them. And what we see, Germany, I think I can use digital payments on my phone since a year now. Well, in Zambia, that's been possible for, I don't know, it's like 10 years or so. It's like a much longer time. So this is the leapfrogging opportunity. So from Germany, when I talk to people who haven't been in Zambia, a rural village in Zambia seems technically far behind, but the reality is it's not. There's actually an opportunity to do things that are not so easy maybe to do within Berlin. And then I think it's not one-sided. It doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be purely personal. You can actually start having different relationships. The one thing it does, it does free you from the need to have one centrally organized and run system. And we were lucky in Europe and many countries. It's not that we just have energy. It's that there were huge investments made into building energy grids. And those investments were government funded. Not everyone paid for it. I didn't pay for power plants to be built. I'm paying 30 cents per kilowatt hour of energy I consume. I never had to make an investment into that.
And you pay tax.
And I pay tax, exactly. So still paying that off. And some company probably made a lot of money on it too. But there's a system that allows me to kind of pay as I go on that. Yeah. And there's a system that structures how all of that works together. But it's not the only possible system. And that's one of the future visions, I think, that you can have more decentral systems. It could be single house, single person, carry it along with you. But it could also be collaborative. And this is the interesting part of the future, a more equitable, more just future could probably overlay multiple different models. And this is an interesting thing for the Solar Biennial. How would different people from different parts of the world see these opportunities and create them together, and what are the technical needs to fulfill?
Yeah, they can have more of a say in how they see it working for themselves in different groups or organizations. Yeah.
What you're saying, a really beautiful thing is because, like the Architecture Biennale this year, how will we live together? It's exactly the question, and it's a question that they try to address globally per pavilion in a way. But one of the curators that I know from the German pavilion, Olaf Graved, he told me that for him the most successful format of his biennial was actually the Zoom call. They had, because it was postponed, and then they had this collective Zoom call where everyone from A to Albania, Albania is not part of it, is it? I'm not sure. Albania is part of it, exactly, to V like Venezuela, and there was a call where everyone had to describe their own position, collectively. And I mean, when I heard that, I thought that is the most beautiful format, because then everyone from their own country could talk about, for example, talking about the solar movement and the solar biennial imagine everyone in every country, you choose 1 or 2 people who could talk about the possibility of implementation of solar energy or solar.
I think what you are alluding to, and what is very interesting, is this idea of the learning aspect of this project, right?
Yeah.
Because learning has to be a huge part of it. I mean, you are talking about creating networks, you are talking about connecting with different people, you are talking about exchanging knowledge, in fact. But it also needs to be, if it's a movement, it needs to be receptive, like a sponge, you know? It needs to learn, it needs to understand what's going on. And that's what I think is interesting to a certain extent in the idea of combining that idea of learning with the idea of the biennial format that is in dire need of reinvention, really. And to have this, create this opportunity to create sort of a mesh also that connects people, connects different kinds of knowledges, connects opportunities for exchange, but also sort of digests all of that into a learning opportunity and grows and changes and adapts and basically becomes more and more of a movement, or a larger and larger movement.
But I really have to comment also on the term movement, because it's interesting. Normally you do something and then you test it and then activates you different, people, different bodies, different ideas, and then it becomes a movement. But it's interesting for you, and it's very ambitious, and I think it's great to be ambitious, about something, and be very dedicated about something, and you are all in your practices, and you are as an institute, thinking, okay, no, before it becomes a movement, we call it a movement, because then you make people believe it could become one.
Well, you know how we always talk about this thing, make people dream.
Yeah.
It's important. If you cannot make people dream, they won't join you in the dream.
Yeah.
So there is a part of this that is about making people dream with you, no?
Yeah.
It's a bit bold of us, yeah, for sure. But it's also because we sense that working with all these people, that there is something, and then we try to kind of capture it, like with this idea.
Yeah. Can I ask very specifically, Felix, but what do you think will Little Sun, the whole project, 10 years of it already, what do you think will it mark a milestone for you to be part of a biennial?
I think if we can really pull off to build a number of solar pavilions essentially as artistic or architectural sculptures, and we can have them in the Netherlands in a solar biennial, and we can then afterwards, either we can make an actual parallel copy, or if we can take the unit and move it afterwards, and literally provide renewable energy in a rural area in Ethiopia or Senegal, and power smallholder farmers, water pumps, grain milling devices, and we can create this feeling that we are actually all together in this world. We are connected by the sun quite clearly. And if we can, we can tell that story of positive opportunity on you could say, the north and south, both sides of the planet in ways, I think that, for me, would be a huge success. And, we've been transforming from working on the small lamps. We're not stopping with the lamps. We're still doing this. There are over 20 million school children in Ethiopia without access to energy. That's an insane number, right? And that's just one, second most populous, but it is just one country on the African continent. And so in my book, a success of Little Sun, independent of the biennial, would be that we managed to advance to these slightly bigger solar systems that allow for people to power more of their lives than just having access to light or to phone charging. And on the other side, I love the idea of the biennial because I think the idea of connecting it to your life, to my life here, is something really, really important. I've learned so much from this project, from working with people in different countries in Africa and different countries in Europe. And it has opened my scope of seeing the world considerably. I started my work as an architect. I somehow ventured into Olafur Eliasson's studio, which was already an incredible experience really for many years. Understanding how you can create artistic tools that allow you to see the world in different ways. And then still, this opened a whole new world to me. There are so great people working on collaboration projects, working on off-grid solar energy, but they don't necessarily have the forum, and the dots are not necessarily always connected. And that is where there is this unique opportunity in doing something which looks at technology like solar, but it looks at it through the cultural lens of a biennial idea. And so I think that's just great. So I would just love to be along, and I hope we can find money to actually do all of this, right? That's to everyone watching.
Another outreach.
Just, side note.
Wait, there will be like a bank details.
Exactly,
coming in and out.
Please give us money here. But no, we also, I think that there's this opportunity to begin inspiring more people to join us in this. And yes, I'm kind of trying to, to Robin Hood that a little bit and work on my project through it, but I think it actually benefits the whole idea of the project. And again, a lot of this actually stems from your table, because somehow that was the first time I actually thought, wow, that's a great idea. We should have thought of that. But I think together we have an incredible network of great people we could invite also to contribute. And I've learned, the art fair here is reasonably diverse in the artist selection. I think it could be, this is more blue chip artists. So I think in the younger generation, the Gen Z, you mentioned collaboration as more of a topic. I think that is absolute. That's what I feel as well.
But
there's so
I have
many
to add one thing here.
Yes.
Intergenerational. What I really think schools suffer, programming, we are so aware about gender equality, diversity, but sometimes this kind of conversation between the young and the old, with a certain experience and exchange, I'm missing that in programming all the time.
I think it's also very important to think about our ancestors, our the children of our children, for who are we designing? And that's, I think, what is uniting us. It's like, okay, we have the things now, but we have a big mission, and that's why it doesn't matter we have to do this together. And if you build a cathedral, it's like you start this and you probably won't finish it yourself in your lifetime. You're going to design it for the future, and I think that's important. If we don't do that now, then there won't be a future. That's very dark, but it's reality.
And I
Well,
think
then
really the locality. That's so the learning indeed. Also, what you said, you learn actually from being, for instance, in Ethiopia. To sort of acknowledge where, specific circumstances are. I think that we really chose the northern hemisphere as the challenge, because indeed, in countries in the southern hemisphere, it's sort of there's a lot of sun. But what do you do in the Netherlands? So.
But I mean, in terms of emissions, also we are the problem. The north is that, I talk to people sometimes about energy in Africa, and someone says, it's great to convert to solar. Like, well, Ethiopia isn't emitting massive CO2. It's like Germany is. But so it's this
maybe
dual.
The pavilion you would build here would be, maybe you would build something else with people there which would work better and actually have a lot of knowledge from there.
Yes.
Actually.
And the thing is, and this is the interesting part, from a rural village in Ethiopia, Rotterdam feels close, and we can make it feel even closer. And in my experience, people in Rotterdam will probably think the rural village in Ethiopia is further away.
How come? How is that?
We had this in 2013 when we had just launched Little Sun, a big department store in Milan, La Rinascente. They usually have Christmas windows, which are fantastically decorated, and usually Nespresso buys them for a few €100,000 to advertise Nespresso, kind of stuff. I'm not advertising Nespresso. I think actually you should not use these coffee cups. It's a meeting. And then Rinascente said, we love this project. We would give you the Christmas windows. Could you think of creating something that tells your story? And we said, that's fantastic. So we talked to our friends in Zimbabwe, our team in Ethiopia, and some others, and said, would you maybe take some pictures of shops where Little Suns are being sold? And could we, we don't make it too specifically. We're showcasing one shop. We'll kind of Photoshop a little bit on that, and we will create these fictitious Little Sun stores in different geographies of the world, and then we will mount those as huge pictures in these windows. And so we had an opening. This was in the Christmas season, and I was there. A few people from Little Sun were there. And I was talking to a lot of people at the opening event. Milan, fashion crowd. It's next to the Duomo. It's like really nice. You have a glass of champagne. I end up in these champagne situations a lot. That's really good. And then I was on the phone with Idias and Melody, two people we collaborate with in Zimbabwe, and they were like cheering on, like, yes, they were like, how's it going? Are the pictures good? Do we look good in the picture? And to them it was totally like we had together made this installation. I was in Milan. They were in Zimbabwe, and clearly Milan was really close in the perception. Like, we did something together there. That's great. And then I talked to a lot of people at this opening, with a champagne glass in hand. And Zimbabwe, where is that? What is that? And it seemed really distant. And the reality of it, of course, is that, you know, if I fly to Zimbabwe, I use my German passport, which is a really nice passport to have. And I can do visa on arrival. I don't even have to go to the embassy beforehand. So I just fly, I book a flight, go on the plane, immigration, get a stamp. You know, it takes 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, that's it. Then when I traveled back, and I had this, I hadn't thought of that before, but I realized that anytime you travel from Africa to Europe, in my experience, the first airport that you hit, there will be customs and border security agents. They won't be waiting where they usually check your passports. They will be standing at the door of the airplane. So within the corridor that you walk through. And in Germany, if you fly to Frankfurt, in Germany, because they're politically correct, they ask everyone for their passport. But of course, those German policemen, they look at me from far away, and yes, they kind of look at my passport, but they don't really look at it. They just see me, and that's fine. And then after me, there's this family coming through who are really scrutinized and checked exactly because simply they look African. And so they run into this border immediately. And so my reality is I can travel totally easily to Zimbabwe. And if you're from Zimbabwe trying to travel to Europe, you have to go through a visa application process. You will be taken out of the queue. And so the reality is Zimbabwe is much closer for me, and it's much easier for everyone in Milan to come to Zimbabwe than vice versa. But still, the perception of the people was a completely different one. And I found that totally astonishing, and it's a super, you know, simple, personal little experience. But it took me this project to see that and to feel that and to experience it. And it's something that we've been, you know, we work as much as we can to obviously combat. And so at Little Sun, we talk very much about the proximity, about the inclusiveness, about the working together. And I have kids now, and I didn't at the beginning of the project. And you know, do you guys have kids?
Yes.
We also have 1 minute left.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Then I'll stop with the kids. Sorry. But it's just like once you have kids, everything is the same. Like Melody and her son had the same experiences I had with my son. Completely, exactly the same. Same diapers, same shit, same, you know, everything. And suddenly I realized, well, we have the same life. And we need to talk much more about that. But that's for the biennial to do.
Well, I think we should invite some sort of closing statement from your side, guys. Sort of a wishes and expectations, or kind of a proclamation of what it is that people will be able to see from September to December 2022.
The solar revolution.
The solar revolution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that we started this conversation now. It will happen in a year, and we need to start a movement. We need to do this together. So this is a question. It's like, if you want to join, it's possible, and let's do this together, because it's for all of us. It's for everyone.
Then I would like to close it with a sentence that I found that you all will appreciate, and Vera is going to love it even, by Octavia E. Butler. It's a beautiful sentence. I'm quoting her. "There's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns." So thank you very much for being here, and we're looking forward to the solar revolution. No, movement. Applaus for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.